So I'm going to start off here basically with what I alluded to in the other video. With some very important differences, which I will make clear. There are very important differences. I really do feel like the Wii U is almost like Nintendo's version of the Sega Dreamcast. I'm probably going to get some disagreement for this, but let me throw it out to you. Let's do a couple of comparisons. Quick historical thing with Sega. And if I get, my order mixed up with it or my timeline's a little bit off, forgive me. I just want to make, as long as you get my general point, that's really what I'm shooting for. So Sega Genesis was really where Sega was on the map for a lot of people. I remember the Sega Master System. I didn't have one originally, but by the time the Genesis came out, and that's the kind of system where, you beg your parents to buy it for you. By the time we got that, we also soon after got the base converter, basically, that attachment that you were able to put on top of it that let you play Master System games. So I was familiar with the Master System and then became very familiar with the Master System and, enjoyed the Genesis for years. Had a great time with the Genesis. Riding high off of that and competing with the Super Nintendo, Sega decided, it was trying to one-up, try to give itself an edge. And to give itself an edge, you start creating your peripherals. You start creating your different things. And with that comes the Sega CD. A decent idea and concept. They were starting to get into optical discs, which, lets you play full motion video. It gives you more capacity. It gives you all those things that we now use, in modern systems or in current day systems. Your PlayStation 4s and your Xbox Ones and even the Wii U here, we're using optical discs. And right here, optical discs. So it's the industry standard now. So they were playing around with it from the Sega CD days. Sega CD didn't really work out. The games weren't necessarily that great. There are some that some people really enjoy and some that are kind of infamous. But overall, it just didn't quite take off. So Sega kind of went, okay, well, that didn't really work. Let's just kind of, move that to the side. We're not really ready for the next gen system yet, but we can squeeze a little bit more blood from this stone here, and let's try to extend the Genesis life a little bit longer. So, come in the 32X. Okay, decent concept, 32 bits, sounds good, but if you ever tried playing the 32X, the games weren't really that great. It wasn't really that much better in any appreciable way, and then you had a separate power supply for the thing. Basically, it could have been its own system that could have been backwards compatible to the Sega Genesis. And if you had just done that, it still might not have done great, but you probably could have pulled it off. Forcing people who already had the Genesis to buy this as an add-on, rather than encouraging people who might not already have it to consider the 32X, or even people who had a Genesis to consider maybe trading in or selling their Genesis and using it as an upgrade with a backwards compatibility. You force people's hands. So that didn't really take off either, and then that kind of got shelved off to the side. So for those of you keeping score at home, Sega's kind of burned you twice. If you were really into Sega, and you love the Genesis, and even if you went back to the Master System days and you love that, the Sega CD and then the 32X are not really leaving a great taste in your mouth. But, that's only 2 strikes. You get 3 in baseball. So out comes the Sega Saturn. That's our next-gen system. My memories of the Saturn, and I promise I will bring this tangent all the way back to this system. I promise I'll bring it back. I'll try to get through this part quickly. My memories of the Sega Saturn are basically going to Blockbuster and getting our parents to rent it. We tried it out. We played Virtua Fighter on it and probably, I think, a couple of other games that came with it. It wasn't that long after the Saturn was launched in North America. We wanted to try it out. We wanted to see if it was a system worthy of us begging our parents to pay way too much money for. It didn't quite make it. We liked it. I actually still really like the Sega Saturn controller. I liked the controller that came with it. I thought it was a really cool looking system. It was kind of neat seeing Virtua Fighter and seeing some of the possibilities, the potential that the system had, but it didn't quite have that I need to have this in my life kind of feeling. So, and it seems that a lot of people kind of felt that way too. It didn't really go off, selling. It was hard to program for, so it didn't help. You weren't getting a lot of software. With a lot of systems, you can have the hardware, but you need the software to go with it, or you can have the software, but you need enough hardware to make it work. It just never came together for the Sega Saturn. And then at that point, Sega, as what seemed to be their way at that point, is they gave up again, really relatively quickly, and they basically admitted that the Saturn wasn't their future, and they decided to push towards their next console. At that point, by this point, I didn't really fully understand it at the time, but Sega was already struggling. They were in trouble. They had swung and missed 3 times, really. And then comes the Dreamcast. Right here. So this system, we had near launch as well. This is not my original Dreamcast. But to make my point about this, I bought this years after the fact. This console is a good 13, 14 years obsolete. But for its time, this one was ahead of the curve. Having, the ability to connect to the internet. So you've got, your telephone line, having a web browser on it, using a Windows operating system on it. It was really kind of a computer. You could have a keyboard attachment. You could surf the web on it. It was very simple, but it was really cool at the time. And then you were using the discs. You had some amazing games that came out for this. Really fun games. I still, to this day, really love this controller. I like it. Not everyone does, but I enjoy it. And I thought they did, even though they weren't able to fully exploit it, I thought even for a memory card, they at least were trying some stuff. And then I thought this was kind of a really cool memory card, the VMU, rather than just a piece of plastic with a chip in it to hold the data. So they tried some stuff, and a lot of it really felt good. Years after the fact, this still feels like it was ahead of its time. And, when we look back on it, I'm hardly alone in this, but when you look back on it, this feels like a game system that a lot of us remember very fondly. So, now I promised, in the long segue, I promised I would bring it back to this system. So, here it is. For me, the NES, amazing system, huge game library, awesome. To this day, one of my favorite systems, barring something like this. One of my favorite game systems. I can still play the original Punch-Out. I can still play, a lot of, even games like Super Spike V-Ball. I loved those games. The original Tetris. I can play that. Sometimes I'll just pop it on, zone out, grab my controller, and I'll just play it when I want to just relax a little bit and just play the game. A lot of great memories with the NES. Super NES, again, huge library, lots of games I still enjoy playing. Another winner as far as I'm concerned. Things get a little murky around the time of the N64. N64 was one of those systems that my family had early on. It's also the first system that we sold off almost, not immediately after. I played Mario 64, I played a couple of other games, but it just didn't have, to me, and there are some that will disagree because for them, the N64 is the system. But for me, having come off the NES with its huge library, great variety, like amazing games that I still play to this day, then coming to the Super Nintendo, again, huge library, great games that I still play to this day, the N64 just didn't hold up to that standard for me. It had the technology, it had great games. Don't misunderstand me. But a lot of the magic quite wasn't there to me. It didn't feel like it. So that was the first system that we actually sold off before the Super Nintendo and the NES. We eventually sold all those systems off, and then eventually my younger brother bought a bunch of them back, and then I have a system that plays those games so I can still play them. Those are the ones I remember fondly. I did get myself an N64 years after, but out of my different retro systems, that's probably the one that gets the least use. I still hate the N64 controller, to be honest with you. But that's a different tangent. I'll move past it. So I'm a little disenchanted with Nintendo right around the N64. So GameCube comes around. I'm a little bit older. You know what? I'm passing on GameCube. I'm on PlayStation. PlayStation 2. I'm focusing on those. Those are the systems of choice. Those are the systems that I'm playing. PlayStation, I had some great times playing it. PlayStation 2, love that system. Huge library. There's a good reason why the PS2 is the highest selling console of all time. And then going forward, I would catch on to the Xbox and that later on, but it was a lot of PlayStation. GameCube, skipped it completely. Didn't even bother with. Didn't even so much as look at it. It's just nothing struck me that I needed to have that GameCube was offering. And this seems to be a reoccurring theme for Nintendo for me, and I think others. So Nintendo was sliding a little bit. N64 was sliding compared to where they had been. GameCube, did alright. It was kind of sliding. Next system, the Wii. Sold 100 million copies, won the generation. But it feels a lot like that one was a paper champion. Realistically, it sold the most units, but it's almost like it did so with smoke and mirrors. It was kind of like a magic trick. You convince people that never would have bought game consoles in the first place that, hey, that's the machine with the controllers that you can move around and you can bowl with it. Marketing-wise, it was brilliant. But in terms of enticing, one of my cousins had that system. I looked at it. I still hated the controllers. I hated them even more than I had hated the N64 controller. And I still kind of hate the N64 controller to this day. And right now, my biggest disappointment with this system has actually nothing to do with this system. It has to do with one of its features that's actually something I like. This one is backwards compatible to the Wii. Awesome. There are actually some decent games on there that I want to play. Some decent games that I actually bought for the Express. And actually, So I went to a jump cut just so I could make my point. Because I couldn't find it on my shelf. So I bought this. This is in one of my most recent pickup videos. The SNK Arcade Collection. I bought this because I knew that this system was backwards compatible. But being that I'm an idiot and didn't actually pay closer attention, I didn't realize that to play this, I actually need to get a Wii controller. Now, does that dissuade me from does that in any way make me feel bad for purchasing this for the price that I got it for? No. When I get the stupid controller, I will play this and I will enjoy it because it's got Metal Slug on it, Baseball Stars 2, and a bunch of other games that I really want to play. However, the fact that you forced me to buy the stupid Wii controller that I don't want, the nunchuck is not even a discussion point. I'll get the stupid remote, but I'm not going to be happy about it. Thanks a lot, Nintendo. Be that as it may, that brings us to this guy. This guy here, almost 2.5 years on the market, hasn't sold 10 million units. This one here lasted 1.5 years in North America from the launch to the time that Sega threw in the towel because they ran out of money and they didn't think they could compete anymore. In that time, this one sold more than this one. This one, if memory serves, I believe, and someone can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it started at $199. This one was $299. This one we remember fondly as being ahead of its time. This one is a real good system that is going to be fondly remembered by some for certain games that they really like, but otherwise it's going to be a system. Even the feature that, kind of holds it apart because Nintendo really obsesses about controller technology for some reason, the Vita can do this. And arguably, the Vita can do it better for no other reason than, yes, you have to pay more to buy a Vita, but it's an optional feature. By making it optional, if you don't want it, you don't have to get it. But the Vita can play standalone games in and of its own. I can take the Vita outside of my house. I don't have one, but if I did, at least that would put it over the top. This one was bundled with this system. I didn't have a choice. I can play games in another room. I can play games without my television. This is good. The fact that if I wander just far enough, if I go to my front porch and decide to try to play it, it will lose connection. Which is fine, that's fair. There's got to be a range limit to this. But at the same time, it's not like the battery life on this is phenomenal. It's decent, but you forced it on me. You gave me a controller with a screen that doesn't necessarily add anything to my gaming experience. There are games that use it, but it's not the biggest thing in the world. You forced me to do it. So you didn't bring revolutionary technology to the table. You didn't necessarily price it right. You didn't brand it right with the Wii U. And I'm not just being negative about it. In my other video, I did go into the things that I really like about it. But I think this is going to be remembered as, yep, it was a system. It was all right. But it wasn't anything, it's not going to have the fun nostalgia of this. Overall, the reason why I brought this comparison in, by the time this system came out for Sega, Sega was just about out of money. This was their last real swing at the can. Sega CD, bombed. 32X, bombed. Sega Saturn, didn't get there. Sega Dreamcast did well enough at the outset, but couldn't sustain enough momentum that by the time the PlayStation came out, I believe it was the PlayStation 2 by this point, by the time the PlayStation 2 came out, Sega knew that they had blown their window. They had a lead time of just enough to try to get ahead that they didn't think that they could compete going forward with the PlayStation. That was their fourth attempt and their fourth strike. And that was the end for Sega. Remember when I said there's a caveat? I said there was a couple of major differences. One, I don't feel like this one will be remembered as fondly. I think there will be people who remember this system fondly. Assuming, and it's still speculation, assuming the Nintendo NX is another console, Nintendo obviously is going to have another kick at the can. For me, N64, good, but it's kind of like strike one for Nintendo because they didn't quite get where they wanted to go. They held on to cartridges for too long. GameCube, you finally went to optical discs, but you went to mini optical discs. Why couldn't you just use CDs? Again, some people really are going to love the GameCube. I couldn't get into it. Assuming I wanted to play the GameCube, though, I could play it on the Wii, but the controller sucks and I hate it. Again, my personal opinion only, but that's where I stand on the Wii. This one, I actually really like it. I like the system. I think it's pretty well done for what it is. But you can't, for all the things you did well, there's a lot of things that just don't work. Nintendo's stubbornness is going to cost them on this one. This one is technically strike 4 for Nintendo. That's why, more than anything, I'm comparing it to the Dreamcast. The Wii, I consider strike 3, and you can make the argument that the 100 million sold says it's not, but you didn't cater it to a gaming market. You sold a lot, you made a lot of money, but the biggest difference that's keeping it working for you is that the Wii sold so well because you played that magic trick. That's only going to work once. It already worked, and then you lost steam as soon as you put the U on it. It didn't work the second time. Bowling wasn't going to save you on this one. So, if both of them are strike 4, what's the other big caveat? I said there were a couple. So, the first one is, I don't think this one is going to be remembered as fondly as this one as far as fourth swing and misses go. And again, you can argue this is the third one because of the Wii U sale. Fair enough. Fine. Assuming, though, you follow it, humoring me for a moment, if we call this Nintendo strike 4, the other big difference is Nintendo is not short on cash. They have enough money to take another stab at it. The handhelds are doing very well. The amiibos are doing very well. So Nintendo has enough money where I honestly think they could fail even one more time. The NX could come out and bomb. Run another one. They're probably not going to give it another shot again if they don't hit it out of the ballpark next time around. But they've at least got the resources, whereas Sega ran out of gas after this one for hardware. At least Nintendo has the resources to try one more time to see if they can learn from their own mistakes. Hopefully they do. We'll see how that goes. With that said, though, my biggest takeaway from it is that I do see some parallels with it. In a lot of ways, Nintendo didn't learn from the sins of Sega. And it is kind of interesting, kind of the way this one is shaping up. Even with the good first-party support that Nintendo offers it, the lack of third-party support that they develop it, I compared these two. And I said, within the time frame, this one has sold more. Part of the reason for that is they also came out with more games. They actually had some third-party support. For Zelda, The delay to 2016 makes this interesting because if they announce another console at their big announcement, I believe it's E3, is when they said they're going to talk about whatever NX is going to be. If it's another console, the question I'm left with, and by all means feel free to comment your thoughts on it, is it a case where Zelda, if they hold off that long and they announce a new console, do they then hold it off to the NX? Do they make a version for both systems so that you can have the Wii U version and then the next gen version? Or do you put it out for this one and then try to go completely new on another system? If I was going to launch another console, at the very least I would consider having Zelda on that console. I don't know if you would want to hold it off that long, or if maybe, like I said, you would release it here first, and then, oh guys, if you really want to see the super fancy version with our next-gen hardware, check out the Nintendo NX Zelda game. I don't know. Mostly me rambling a little bit. Just some thoughts that the more I thought about the system when I kind of wanted to talk about it, the more it made me think about this one. And like I said, more than anything, this one here holds a fun place for me with all the memories I have of all the games I played on this one. This one I don't think is going to have quite that for me. I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm still going to have fun with it. But like I said, Nintendo has a lot of catching up to do if they want to kind of recover. Because all the 3DSs in the world aren't going to make up for the fact if they make another misstep on another console. So that's just me. Thank you for watching if you made it to the end of the video. I apologize for rambling quite that much. But if you have any thoughts on it, by all means, I'd love to talk about it. Feel free to share yours. And thanks very much for watching.